There is a point where the pressure is so high that you have to make a choice. Because if you start to go down the road and you spend 24 hours, 7 days a week to commiserate about how bad it is, you're never going to get out of it. You know, you're like in the, what do I need to do to survive now mode? And you push everything else away. And then when something else comes, you go like, okay, what else can happen? Oh, another thing. And that's when you surrender. And within the surrender comes the turn. There is a point where the pressure is so high that you have to make a choice. Because if you start to go down the road and you spend 24 hours, 7 days a week to commiserate about how bad it is, you're never going to get out of it.
Yeah.
I remember that I worried about paying bills twice a month when I had to pay it. And I literally trained myself to not think about it. I took the bills, I didn't open them until it was that time of the month when it was time to open them and figure out how I was going to pay it. Inevitably, there was a letter from another bank that sent me a check. Do you need an extra $5,000? I sure do. Paid the bills, never thought about it until it was the next time to pay. That's how bad it was. Like you're past the point of even making a plan. You're like in the, what do I need to do to survive now mode? And you push everything else away. And then when something else comes, you go like, okay, what else can happen? Oh, another thing. And then you go like, is this ever going to go end? And that's when you surrender. And within the surrender comes the turn.
And that ability to compartmentalize your struggle. Mm-hmm. Say, I'm only going to struggle when I need to struggle in my struggle. I'm not going to struggle about my struggle when I don't need to be struggling about my struggle.
Right. And that's what they mean with don't sweat the small stuff. That wasn't even small stuff. That was big stuff. That was survival stuff. But I think that ultimately this is what prepared me to then play poker with the big guys on a much larger scale. Right. And I'm going to tell you the story on how it turned in the business. So there was a moment where I got on the market and it's me, cute little me, 30 something years old. And I'm walking around these conventions and I'm going like, I need meetings with like the big guys, Getty, Corbis, whatever. And nobody would have a meeting with me because I was a nobody. And so I figured out, where do these guys go at these conventions? And I realized very quickly, they all go to the bar. And then I realized that the women don't go to the bar. And I'm like, but if they don't go, I go. So I went to the bar. So I developed I write about this in my book, Happy Woman, Happy World. I call this the Cinderella rule. You always dress up for the ball at the bar, 3-drink maximum, in bed by midnight, and you walk to your room alone.
Yeah.
Right. And so I went to the bar. The guys don't follow the 3-drink rule. Absolutely not. So they're drunk. They're telling you stuff, things that you really shouldn't know.
Yeah.
Loose lips sink ships. And then I'd just disappear at midnight. And then the next day they'd be like, oh, hey, and I'm like, I don't remember anything from last night. And so they knew they could trust me. That's how I started getting my meetings, because I built the relationships. And then finally I got my meeting with the largest supplier in the world, Getty Images. And I flew to Seattle into the meeting. I walked in, and they're used to companies coming with millions and millions and millions of images that they're loading in the database. And I walked in and they said, so what are we talking about? I said, 400 images. I mean, they almost fell off their chairs laughing. And I go like, what? Like we're meeting with you here and you have like 400 images. That's it. Reframing, remember? Debating, reframing. So this is what I said. I said, the photographers that I work with are the best in the world, which is why they photograph the best in the world. They don't need to take hundreds of shots that are mediocre. They take one. So if you want me to fill your database with junk. So just so you have quantity, I'm not your girl. But if you want me to give you high quality, highly sellable stuff that's done by the best for the best, I said, then you need to sign me. And I can build it while we fly the plane, because when you give me the data of what sells, I can give you more of that. And I got the deal. And the next month, I got the first big check.
I would love to know how a little German girl came to do all this amazing stuff. And that's a pretty big question to bite off, but there it is.
Yeah, I mean, and a Bavarian girl in Lederhosen, no less, right? So
I've seen the picture on your website.
Yeah, I put that up there, so people actually, see, this is not a joke. This is the real thing. I think that, Jeff, for me, it was kind of the feeling that I was not in the right place when I was in Germany, and I don't know if you're familiar with Myers-Briggs personality assessment, but
yes,
so
INTJ, reporting for duty.
All right, ENTP.
Oh,
and
wow,
so,
right.
yes. And so what I found is that as I got, later on in life, learned about Myers-Briggs, that even cities and countries have their own personality type. And let's just say the German personality type does not match mine. And so I felt that I had to go somewhere else. And I started with an aptitude test. This is how it all begins. And I'm 16. I'm not so smart. I'm not in the super smart school. I'm in the okay smart school. And then they give me an aptitude test, and it's like 16 pages long. And, and it's like asking you all these questions. Do you like being outside? Sure, I do. Do you mind carrying heavy stuff? No, I don't. I'm healthy. Are you afraid of heights? No, I'm not. It's just like pages after pages after pages. And after 16 pages, I'm like all excited. I wonder what it's going to be. What am I going to be? What am I going to be? And it says, you should be a roofer.
A roofer.
A roofer. Okay. So I was like, oh, I guess this doesn't work for me. And I decided in that moment that what sort of other people would suggest I should be probably wasn't going to work, judging by what I just had learned. And so I said to the career counselor, I want to be something else. She says, well, what do you want to be? I said, I want to be a textile designer. She says, oh, too many applicants, no jobs. Then I said, I want to be a jewelry designer. She goes, too many applicants, no jobs. And I knew where this was going. And she says, well, what else? And I said, a photographer. And guess what she said?
Too many applicants, no jobs.
How did you know, Jeff? And so I looked at her.
Study.
I know. And I looked at this and I said, I don't think this is going to work for me. And I became a photographer anyway. And then there was this moment where I'm in Switzerland on this glacier. And it was my job as the assistant to bring in the Audi Quattro with a helicopter flying on top of the mountain. I'm going like, I'm outside. I'm definitely schlepping. I am not afraid of heights. I'm doing exactly what the aptitude test said. It just wasn't their interpretation. That's how it all started.
That's pretty funny. So an ENTP, I Googled it real quick while you were sharing. And that is a debater. That's the moniker, right? A debater, somebody that likes to engage. That says extroverted, intuitive thinking, and prospecting. They tend to be bold and creative. And it sounds like you basically like to argue.
No. We have to say it. We are reframing. And that was true to type. See,
okay.
I wasn't debating you. I was already reframing it.
Gotcha. I like that. That's very, very sophisticated. Yes. So you're saying that, is that what, I mean, I don't know German culture very well. I went there for a week once and I remember they ate sausage and jam for breakfast. That's what I remember. And it was beautiful and I loved it. And the Rhine River, I wanted to try to swim across it, but somebody told me not to, because I'd probably drown. And it was, I loved actually my trip there, but I didn't like get to know it well enough to go, oh yes, you're a ENTP. Clearly you weren't a fit. But was that it? Like you're supposed to just do what you're told, and like you wanted to reframe people, or what was the problem?
Well, I mean, Germany is built on a lot of rules and regulations, and
I mean, they do have that reputation, like very Prussian,
which works really well for me now as a strategist, right? Because now I can tell other people about processes and systems and journey maps and all that kind of good stuff. But when I was developing myself and figuring out who I was, I certainly was not going to be pigeonholed. And then, especially, as they thought I should have been a secretary, and I want to be the boss. So I didn't want to be the secretary. I want to be the boss. And so I decided that the rigidness of the Germans, or their, their, how would I say that, their conforming to rules and their love of rules wasn't entirely for me. So I ended up in Los Angeles, and I call Los Angeles very, very lovingly the city of misfits. Everybody who doesn't fit anywhere else comes here, and magically we all gel together.
I've experienced that. I've spent a lot more time in LA than Germany, and I've definitely experienced that. So you came to LA, and I see you. So you're first generation immigrant. That I knew that because you came from Germany. It says that you landed $135,000 in debt as a single parent. First of all, I'm sorry that happened, although I suspect that it didn't kill you and so thus made you stronger. But tell me that story. It sounds like an interesting one.
Yeah, I mean, so here I'm arriving, it's not really quite fresh. I mean, I at that time I was a photo editor at Elle magazine. I was 23 years old. I already had achieved a good level of success. I had figured out that I wasn't that great of a photographer, but really good at the business behind things, and loved it. And it came really natural to me working with creatives and getting that all worked out, because I like non-conforming, colorful people. I really do. And so I immigrated because my father got fired. And my father got fired because he asked a question on whether the board of directors still believed in him, and they wanted to teach him a lesson. And then they had the majority on the vote, and he got fired. They didn't have a replacement. Subsequently, the company never really recovered. And I looked at it and I'm like, what do I see here? I see somebody who is very convinced that they are all that, and takes all the self-esteem out of his job. And I'm going down the exact same road. I cannot do that. And I pulled the plug. If it's okay if I say a bad word, I think I was a little bit of an, and
I thought you were going to say a bad word. That's
okay,
just a warm-up word.
Okay, that's a warm-up word. All right. Unfiltered, ladies and gentlemen, this is unfiltered. And I decided that I needed to really figure out who I was, because I wanted to be liked, known, and appreciated for who I was and what I brought, not through my position. And so I left and didn't really have much of a plan. So I ended up in Los Angeles after 4 months.
So you left Germany? I
left Germany, yes.
Okay.
By myself, on a plane next to a man who had like really bad eczema from head to toe and was scratching himself the entire flight from Munich to Miami. I remember this like it was yesterday. And I'm like, what am I getting myself here into? And then I knew that I wanted to be in Los Angeles. I got a job as an artist representative. And then I was laid off in a massive recession. And I met a great man who had only two flaws. He was a pathological liar and an alcoholic. By the time I figured it out, I already had been married and was pregnant. And I had to figure out how I was going to go and make something out of myself. And then a decade of tragedy and disaster and bad luck starts. And I am between fires, floods, riots, earthquakes, September 11th, and it just kept coming, and a lawsuit. And then finally, I lost my business within 6 months. The first instance was that I had an employee that betrayed me and got too close to a key vendor, and they had this idea on how to run a business, which was my business without me. And then 6 months later, just as I'm in the middle of this lawsuit, I'm thinking I'm just about to recover because production season comes and we're producing for Mercedes-Benz and BMW and Wrangler and Levi's, and it's all good. And the planes hit the towers and it's over. I mean, literally in 24 hours, it was over. There was nothing to rebuild because there was nothing. And that's how I ended up $135,000 in debt. as a single mom, as an immigrant, trying to have to figure out how in the world am I going to crack this code now?
Okay. So, yeah, that's pretty brutal. What was the business? Video production or what?
So the business was a photographer representation agency. So I was
Okay.
representing a lot of different photographers and a still photography production company where I did a lot of the production work for companies that came from other places in the world.
Gotcha. Okay. So, I mean, I guess the next question is fairly obvious. How'd you recover? What'd you
How
do?
did you recover? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think a big part of my story is that, Jeff, that there comes a moment, I think, where you are stretched way beyond your limits. And for anyone who's listening and has a lot of adversity or is going through some really difficult times right now, I believe that part of activation, on whether you believe in God, spirit, the universe, or whatever eternal energy that might be for you, but for those of us who are here to make an impact in the world, there has to be some sort of an activation, because if you don't know where people are at, how would you be able to relate? I mean, very rarely people that achieve success, it says the princess woke up one day and everything was hunky-dory until somebody gave her the crown, and then she became the queen and she lived heavily
Right.
ever after. I mean, that's just
Right.
not the story. And so
And nobody wants to follow that person,
not
by the way.
really,
Yeah.
because that's kind of like, yeah, well, you didn't work for that. You didn't have to do anything to get there.
Right.
And so I decided that I was not going to drown in a puddle. That if I was going to drown, I was going to drown in the ocean.
Hmm.
And I fought like hell. And I
That's a
had,
beautiful metaphor, by the way.
do you like that?
Yeah, you keep going. I'm just going to let that one kind of wash over me for a minute, though.
Yeah,
That's pretty
don't
good.
drown in a puddle. It's not worth it.
Like, if you're
Make it,
going to drown, drown in the damn ocean.
yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, at least it's worth it.
Mm.
And so I decided that if it was going to go down, at least it was going to go down in flames. I mean, what other purpose would it have? So the dilly-dallying. So I had this idea, and interestingly enough, the photographer that betrayed me had given me the idea. This is sometimes how synchronicity in life works, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he was an architectural and interior photographer, and I had decided that I was going to build up a stock photography syndication for interior and architectural photography. And as I'm building this, now I'm settling my lawsuit. So the lawsuit is settled, and I'm thinking, yay, I didn't lose. I got money. I pay the attorney. I pay my debt, and I'm at zero. Literally at zero.
Yeah. Funny
Like
how
I
that
remember
works.
going downtown to the flower mart, picking up the flowers, driving down to Long Beach to my attorney and the staff, bringing them the flowers, looking at my bank account, and it's at zero. I'm going, shit, I'm going to have to start this all over again. I fought for a year for nothing. So I'm going again in debt, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, now I'm back
Mm-hmm.
again, $135,000 in debt. I don't know what it is with this number. And I realize that, okay, now I have to borrow money to pay interest on borrowed money. Great financial strategy, as any accountant can tell you. It's the beginning of the end. I mean, it's over, right?
Mm-hmm.
I fly to Germany, drum up some business, and visit my dad. My dad had a stroke. My dad didn't have a stroke. My father had pancreatic cancer, and within 6 weeks, he dies. The stroke was a tumor that had metastasized in the brain. So here I am. Now I'm at the funeral in Germany, paying for a funeral I can't pay for, on a flight I can't afford, having to figure out how to run a business after I've just lost my best friend and my biggest supporter and my number one fan, and the man who always told me that every idea of mine was great. And so I fall to my knees and I raise my fist and I yelled at God, talk about defining moments. And I literally was in Nether Bavaria on this picturesque hill with a Baroque church. And I'm yelling and I said, if you have a plan, this would be an excellent time to fill me in.
What year was this?
That was in 2003.
Okay.
And so I'm
a Baroque girl on a Baroque church. Oh no.
yeah. Thank you for that visual. Yes, good one. And so here I am. And then I surrendered. And then I said, okay, fine. I'll drown in the ocean then. At least at $135,000, it's worth it. It's not like it's $10,000 and I'm not making it. At least it's a big enough amount to make it worth anything. And I surrendered. And then my phone rings and it's my office in Los Angeles and says, oh, by the way, we just were served a notice. We're losing the house. Oh, great. Just add it to the list. So now I have to figure out how to pay for the funeral money I have, pay for my debt on money I don't have, find a new place on money I don't have. And I'm going like, okay, well, I guess it's over, right? I guess it's over. I have to figure out what I'm going to do next. And then I get a letter from the White House. The White House. And I had, in my absolute desperation, about 6 months earlier, written a letter to the President of the United States. And I did that because my former mother-in-law, Jeff, just wouldn't shut up about it. She's like, you have to write the President of the United States. He's the president. If the president can help you, nobody can. It's your president too. Why don't you write a letter to the president? So I'm going like, fine. I'm going to write a letter to the President of the United States so I just don't have to listen to this anymore. So I'm sitting down, I'm writing my letter to the president, I mail it off, I'm going, whatever. I get a letter from the White House. And in the letter, it says, Jeff, the president sends you his best wishes. Yeah, of course, the president never saw the letter.
Right.
But it put me in touch with the Small Business Administration and not with some low-level loan officer, but with the deputy chief director. And I had written my business plan on weekends and nights. And I was ready when I walked in. And then Lorenzo Flores said to me, I'll put in what you put in. And for the first time, I had hope. And within 3 months, they found me a bank that was going to restructure my debt. So I had a 10-year fixed loan that I could, pay off. And then 18 months later, I am the world leader in my category. So after I got the money, 3 months later, I'm break even. And then another 15 months later, I'm the world leader. I'm selling into 79 countries in the world. And what made me famous, it was that a byproduct of the best photographers photographing the best architects and interior designers' homes were celebrity homes. And so I have Madonna, Francis Ford Coppola, Simon Baker, Julianne Moore, Terry Hatcher. I mean, Seal, Heidi Klum, you name them. The stories just kept coming and coming because it all came out of embargo. Remember, it was a photo edit at Elle magazine. So I used to buy these stories. So when I got those stories, I knew exactly what I needed to do with them. And we sold Madonna's house 35 times all over the world. And that's what attracted a Bill Gates company. And they said, well, can you tell us how you do it? And I said, like any smart woman, I said, you want to know what I know? You need to pay for it. I'm not telling you anything. And then they made me an offer too good to refuse. And I sold my business. And then 18 months after the worst moment of my life, I'm a self-made multimillionaire.
Hey, sorry for the interruption. I just wanted to let you know you can get a free copy of my book, The Millionaire Shortcut, which shows you the fastest way to become a millionaire in the new economy. And there's a special link just for this episode in the description. So thanks for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the episode.
I don't hear a lot of stories that I put side by side with my crazy turnaround recovery story, but that's one right there. And it's amazing how many common elements it has. I'm like listening to your story. Like, I feel like I'm almost in it. I'm like rooting for you. Like 18 months was a magic time span for me. In 18 months, I paid off $495,000 in debt. So I bottomed out at 495, and it took me 18 to get back to zero with internet marketing. So that jumped out. And it was actually defaulted SBA loans that put me in that debt. So SBA helped you get out. SBA helped me get in. And it's still to this day, I can't get an SBA loan. It's actually funny. I talked to somebody like a few months ago, and they're like, yeah, the SBA ever want to work with you again. But what an amazing story. I mean, regardless of the details, the thing that I most connected to is that moment when it's almost like, I'm curious if you experienced that moment similar to the way I experienced my equivalent moment, where you're almost impressed with yourself. Like, how I have to have some like pretty big, I was gonna say pretty big balls. You probably wouldn't say that. I have to have like some pretty big gumption to get this rock bottom. Like, not just anybody can get this far down, you know, like you gotta really take some risk. You got to really bet on yourself. Like, it's a pretty spectacular failure to find yourself in that moment.
Oh, it takes talent.
Was there any part of you that was actually like impressed?
Oh yeah. I mean, 100%. It's so funny that you say that, because that's exactly how I felt. I refer to this as some really excellent, terrible decisions that I made that got me there. I mean, nobody forced me to marry that man. Nobody forced me to get married, to have a baby. Nobody forced me to, go in business on my own without having any idea on what I was doing. Nobody forced me to do any of it. I came up with this all by myself. It's remarkable. And then you are there and you go, I mean, it takes a certain talent to get this far.
Yeah.
And deep down.
Yeah. And let me ask this, how much money were you making when you got yourself that far in debt?
Oh, I wasn't making any money at the point.
Yeah, that's what people ask me. They're like, Jeff, you were a piano player who only made like 50 or 60 grand a year. How does a person who only makes 50 grand a year get $500,000 in debt? Like, easy. That's actually impressive.
It's
in
easy.
A way, right?
Yeah, it's easy. It's because you invest in all
leverage, and then you lose.
Exactly. Yeah, you have a staff, you have a business, you are advancing. You're advancing your hook, so I had told the best photographers in the world, the reason they were going to sign with me is because I was going to digitize their archive. I flew to New York. I walked in their studio. I grabbed literally physically the boxes and flew him back to Los Angeles with me, send him to India to be digitized. I mean, and I paid for all of that out of my pocket against future earnings. That was the only way a newcomer could make an offer too good to refuse for photographers who are notoriously bad in running their own businesses. But you're going to have to pay for it before you get your return on investment. And so that's how I got into so much debt. And when the money came quickly, but yeah, it takes a certain time of talent. And I would say part of it is like, you don't know any better. Part of it is that you are so far beyond that fail safe switch.
Yeah.
Because that broke $100,000 ago, that the fail safe switch. So there is no more switch, because it
sounds like for you, that switch kind of broke probably when you left Germany. Like in a way, you kind of left it behind. Right.
It's interesting that you say that. I don't think I've ever thought about it like that, but yes, I mean, if there was a risk, it was just, to me, it was just anything but this. And that is how I made a lot of my decisions, where I said, this isn't right. And there was a part when I'm really, really super honest, and I don't tell this part of the story very often, Jeff, is that, and I'm curious to see if that happened with you too. But when I was a photographer rep and a producer, I remember sitting there and I'm going like, this is not at my level. I can play at a much, much bigger global scale. I knew I had what it takes. I knew I was smart. I knew I could figure things out. And it just had become too small. But I wasn't reacting on the information, this is too small, until the decision was made for me. And then I had no choice. Did that happen to you?
Yeah, it's so interesting you say that, because one of the questions I was going to ask you is if in hindsight, you didn't see your story as your subconscious having done exactly what it needed to do to put you in the situation where the only way out was up to the level that you were capable of. I was going to ask you that question, and I feel like you just kind of answered it. And that question is based in my experience where, and it's happened a couple times. I've bottomed, I valleyed, and then I peak, and then I valley, but the valley's not as low as the previous valley. And then I peak again. And then I've kind of had this, EKG waveform in my life. And the most recent bounce I can feel is it's a bounce to the stratosphere, like it's happening. And I'll call my shot. I'm not embarrassed to declare that. But every time what I realize is exactly what you just said, which is like, damn it, in a perfect world, I wouldn't need to play these games with myself. I wouldn't need to put myself with my back against the rope so that I could find my strongest punch. I would just come out and punch. But for some reason, I think when you haven't fully stepped into what you're capable of, but you deeply know it, but you still logically dispute it, then like there's like this part of you that will put you in a situation where the only way out is to finally do what you're supposed to do. That was my experience.
You said that really beautifully. I think that there is absolute ignorance on my part, at least, where I pretended that wasn't happening, that I wasn't really all that happy with that. And so retroactively now, if I look back and I said, it was the best thing ever happened to me, because if they didn't do the shit that they did, and they're exactly where they were back then. It did nothing for their advancement. But look at what happened in my life. I put my daughter through college. She has no debt. I put money aside so she can do a down payment for a house. My daughter's about to get married. I can do this again. And it's interesting that you say, that you still have the downs. And I think it's important for us to mention that it's not that once you have it figured out that you're going to have to, that the story just goes, figured it out. That's not the story. The story is things has it figured out, crash.
Yeah.
Things it's got it figured out now, crash. Things it's got it figured out now, for sure, crash. And until you get back to that sweet spot where you say, okay, now I know, because I excluded. And I think this is the other part that we learn when we make so many mistakes or perceived failures, is that you start to recognize that when you start going down that road, you go like, no. This time I'm not going to go this deep down that road, because I see the signs. And you go, yeah, I put time and money and energy in this, but I can see it's not giving me a reward. You pull back sooner. You don't go all the way anymore. You know the signs on how to push against these different kind of elements of what's possible and what's not possible. So I agree with you, is that we get better at failing faster, and we get better at being discriminatory with our own decisions, where you go, that was a really crazy, stupid decision. I think I'm not going to do that anymore. Oh, that was a really good one. Oh, I'm going down that felt good. Right. And right now, what I think in where we are as a society, what's happening and what I feel energetically, and I would love to hear what you say about this, Jeff, is that I feel that we are getting in a very collaborative and partnership driven environment, that a lot of the lone wolf stuff that we did a while ago, that's almost like that's shifting into collaboration. And that's the best way I can describe it. But I feel that I'm having a lot more opportunities for partnerships and a lot more opportunities for other people to say, hey, can we do something together? And it now again forces me to step outside of the queen of my castle to say, well, maybe many people can rule this kingdom together.
Yeah. I do think that I do feel that shift in the environment. It's interesting because I think there's two sides to it. There's kind of like a bright and sunny side to it, and then there's like a dark underbelly to it. And it's a pancake, right? It just has a shiny top and a dark bottom. But it being what you're saying, that people are kind of I think to some degree it's seeking safety in numbers,
Mhm.
but because there is a lot of risk in the world right now. But I think also it is, I think some of it is a reaction to the cynicism of the marketplace, where people kind of don't trust lone wolves anymore, because we figured out how easy it is to manufacture a lone wolf story. And so the shortcut to trust is to show yourself as already trusted.
Oh, I like that.
And
That is so good.
collaboration presents that, right?
Oh, I hope
Um,
everybody heard that, because that's really powerful. I think there's a lot of truth to that. The lone
Yeah.
wolf can be fabricated for sure.
Yeah, it is. I mean, you can go rent. I wrote about this in my book. I forget what the price is. It's like $60 an hour. If you go Google private jet photography studio, you can go rent a set that looks like you're on a private jet for maybe it's $200 an hour or something, right? Like that, right? I mean, anybody with a phone and $1,000 can make themselves look like a baller. And and some things are harder to fake than others, but I think the authentic, and the other thing too is I do think there's and I'm curious, what time frame do you feel this shift happen? You feel this is like in the last 6 to 12 months or longer than that?
No, last 6 to 12 months.
Yeah,
sure.
I honestly think people got kind of they felt very isolated in the last couple of years with COVID and the lockdowns and everything, especially where you are in LA. Like, you guys took it to the extreme. Like,
We take everything very seriously here,
yeah.
Especially when it comes to that kind of stuff. Yes.
So I got to think that's part of it too. I want to ask you something about your story though. When you look back on it, I'm curious, how did you, because I've done this analysis for myself, and this is me interviewing you, not me talking about me, but I'll just say, like, I'm somewhat projecting here. Do you think that you, or have you analyzed the chain of causality and decision making that created that situation that put you in that hole?
Yes and no. So yes, from the perspective that I know I'm here to make a big impact. I've always known. I just didn't know what that was going to look like. I had moments in this where I said, seriously? It's like, what's that all about? Where I was craving the safety. But then I realized that safety is an illusion. I've done a fair amount of personal development, which, I know you have too. I don't even need to ask you if you have or not, because nobody gets here without that. And you look at this and you say, okay, let's be honest here for a second. It's like, what's this about? Like, why am I doing this? So part of it is that we have to cut the ties to our old story, our old program, that stuff that runs us. And sometimes a very drastic experience cuts that faster than anything else, because when it's drastic, it goes like, it's not true. There is no safety. Being employed is not safe. You can lose your job. I don't understand. To this day, I don't understand why banks give somebody who has a paycheck more value than somebody who has millions in the bank. So they go, well, the millions can disappear. I'm like, the job can disappear. It can get fired tomorrow. But this like setting in the structure is so intensely set into it. So part of it was, I think, a subconscious desire to really break the structure, to create the freedom for the rebuild that then is the definition of who you really are. And the reorientation is sometimes more difficult than a rebuild. It's like, almost like with real estate investment, right? Sometimes it's just easier to just take the whole house down and rebuild a new one, versus like going in and like, oh God, we got mold and we got termites and we got water damage.
Or just let the bank have it and find a new project. I've had to do that.
Let the bank have it. Yeah. And so I think that is part of entrepreneurship at that level, is that when you really want to push it, I mean, everybody I know, and I'm going to talk to David Meltzer tomorrow again. I mean, his story, I mean, he's lost like millions and millions.
Yeah.
10 million.
Yeah.
Right. And yet here he is. None of these stories are a prince and princess's story. Everybody says the same thing. It's like the activation lies in the darkness. And I think when you get to that point that you realize there is a switch in the dark room, you're just stumbling around and pretending like you don't know where the switch is. Well, then go find it.
So I love that. I love that image of the dark room. I have a couple things, and then I want to ask another question. I have three things in my mind. I'm going to see if I can remember them all in sequence. The first thing is I have a theory on the banks and why they'll loan money to an employee rather than an employer, right? I'm an employer. I have 150 employees, and it's actually hard for me to get a bank loan. But if I was one of my employees, it would be easier for me to get a bank loan than being the employer. I think it's psychology. I think banks are betting on the psychology of enslavement that, and I don't mean this in broad melodramatic terms. I'm just saying as a practical reality, people that have W-2 paycheck-based jobs, they are used to doing what they have to do to get the money, and they're used to working for their masters, and they're used to being good, compliant little inside the boxers. And that's what a bank wants in a borrower. The bank wants to be your master too. They want to be your boss too. They want you to do what they tell you or what you have to do to get them the money, just like your boss wants you to do what they tell you or you have to get the money, right? And so I think they're betting on the psychology, whereas a bank knows some people like us, you know what? Maybe we can't make the payment. We're not right now.
It looks, I mean, it's looking good for now.
But we're not going to allow the debt to hijack our mindset.
That's true.
An employee will allow the debt to hijack their mindset and put them into whatever it takes mode. We'll do whatever it takes, but not for the bank. We'll do it for us.
That's true. Because
so why would the bank bet on us?
Yeah,
right?
Because we're not drowning in the puddle. So we will evaluate on whether that's a puddle or the ocean.
Banks are puddle vendors.
Yes. Oh, I like that. That's a good, I never thought about it like that, but I think.
And we're like, yeah, whatever. We'll refill your puddle. We got to go over here and scoop out the ocean. We might need 6 months, but we'll be back. We'll have your money, but just chill. And they're like, no, that's not how we work.
Yeah, no problem.
So anyway, that was the first thing. The second thing was, if anybody's listening to Beate's story and knows my story, I want to encourage you to look at these moments. Beate's moment on the hill in Bavaria. It's probably a full-fledged mountain if it was in Bavaria.
No, it's a town, and it's like the hill in the town where the church is built on top.
Okay,
it's not a mountain. No,
not full-fledged mountain. Okay,
no.
So Beate on the hill in Bavaria. This is Jeff living at his ex-wife to be's parents' house after he got evicted, and he's $500,000 in debt. This is David Meltzer after he lost $10 million. This is whoever, right? This is Donald Trump after he declared bankruptcy, who, by the way, rebounded to become president of the free world. Like, I mean, these are people at these low points. This might be you, the listener, at this low point. And I want to encourage you to look at this moment. And if you caught how Beate talked about it, where she was like, I don't know if you I'm sure you noticed this about yourself. You had a real sense of humor about it. It was very light the way you talked about that moment. You're like, God, if you've got a plan, this would be a good time to tell me. And then, oh, I'm going to lose my house. Well, whatever, add it to the list, like that lightness where you can look at your stress and say, okay, either, and let's say it's the precursor, the step before, like when you're about to do something and you're like, okay, this could be the failure that leads me to my greatness, or this could be the success that leads me to my greatness. And actually, in the end, it doesn't really matter which one it is. And for you on that hill, you were like, okay, this is a failure that I know I'm meant to have. You said it, you knew you were meant to have a huge impact in the world. So on top of that hill, you already knew that was just another chapter in the story, right? But it's the ability to know why you were put on this earth and that you were destined for something greater that's actually the great equalizer of all experience. If you can develop that belief, and by the way, the word belief is defined as that in which we choose to put our faith. It's actually something we choose. It's not something our parents gave us that we can never trade in. If you put your faith in this notion that you were created for something great, then you can take those lowest moments and process them as plot points in a really cool story. And that's all they have to be. And I feel like that's what you did, at least in the way you told it. That's how it felt. I know I'm supposed to be interviewing you, but can I just tell you a story I'm really proud of?
Well, we can just have a conversation and call it an interview.
Good. Thank you. All right. Thank you. All this pressure. So I was really proud of this. Because I feel like there's like a moxie here. And I wonder if we can, you showed me yours. I'm going to show you mine. And then maybe we can try to like get to the heart of this. Because the reason I started this show, Unlock Your Potential, is I really believe like there's nobody listening right now that does not have immense potential for greatness and to create their beautiful, amazing life. Not mine, not yours, theirs, right? And I just don't think we live in a world that teaches people to believe that and that fosters and nurtures it. That's why I started the show. So I think we're touching on an element of this sort of industrious cleverness where like you're like, okay, I'm a nobody. How do I get the somebodies to listen? Right. And I'll share that for me, when I was a piano player in Houston, which I did before I became an entrepreneur, I basically realized in my early 20s that the only people in Houston that were like working piano players that really made a good living were the people that played in what was called the society circuit. So they basically played all the really high-end private parties for all the really, really wealthy people, right? Like your typical musician would make like $100 at a gig. But if you got a society gig at some big mansion, you might make $1,000 at a gig, right? So, but I was a 23, 22-year-old piano player. I didn't go to Juilliard. I didn't go to one of the big famous conservatories. And I hadn't been on the scene for 30 years. So there was no way for me to break into this scene. So what I did was I went and they had these magazines in Houston where like the rich people paid for these magazines to exist just so they could have their pictures taken to be in the magazine so that other rich people could buy the magazines and see pictures of their friends in the magazines. It was ridiculous. It was magazines just to show themselves off to themselves. One was called Paper City and one was called Texas Society, I think. Anyway, so what I did was I started buying these magazines and actually memorizing the names and faces and companies of the wealthiest people in Houston. And then I went to the restaurants in the nicest parts of town and I got them to hire me for gigs. And I said, look, I know I'm young, but here's what I'll promise you. I'll never come in smelling like smoke. I'll always wear a tailored suit. I'll always be on time. And I'll never talk too much to the guests. And I was like, basically, I'll make you look good, right? And nobody cares if I'm the best piano player or whatever. And so I got these gigs and then I would turn the piano so that I could see the door. And whenever somebody came in the restaurant that I recognized from these magazines, I would have their waiter go ask them by name to send a request over and I would play their favorite song. And then inevitably they would tip me. They would send me $100 bill. They always tipped $100 bills. And then I would take the $100 bill and I would send it to the bar and I would have the bartender send the table around to drinks with their own tip money and a little note that said, thank you, whatever the name was, right? Like, thank you, Carolyn, or thank you, Linan, or thank you. I hope you enjoyed the song. By the way, and I would say something like, cause I studied these magazines. I would be like, by the way, I hope your husband's deal, went through without any problems or something. Right. Cause I knew what businesses their husbands were in and stuff. And it only took one lady where I got the name right. I got the husband's name right. I got the company name right. And she came over and she's like, who are you? How do you know me? How do you know my husband? How do you know my husband's business? And I said, I read about it in a magazine. Well, next time she threw a party, she requested me by name. And then I was in the circuit. And I was the only pianist in Houston I was 22. I was the only pianist under 50 in that circuit. because I did that. It was, and so anyway, I mean, I'll admit I was kind of proud of myself. I thought I was very clever, but that was, it's like you crack an uncrackable situation because you just don't accept that it's an uncrackable situation. There's always a way.
I call these backdoor strategies. Yes, 100%.
And so what happened to you that you believed in yourself enough that you had the hubris, the arrogance, the delusion to actually be the person to go hack these strategies when you're not supposed to be able to hack them?
Because I don't think, back to my aptitude test, just because somebody has an assessment interpretation doesn't mean that that's going to work for me. That I may still have the same assessment, but my application might be different. And that's when I realized for the first time in my life, and this is what I bring in my consulting today and in my strategy work, that's what is probably one of the most powerful things I can do for my clients, because I'm so trained in this now to listen for something that stands out and that is unusual and that has that backdoor strategy component to it, that when I build systems and when I do, unique positioning statements and when I help with a differentiation factor, it's normal to me now. But you're absolutely correct. It is an audacity. I always say resilience is the audacity to not give up. And you are absolutely right. I was just too bloody arrogant to give up. And at that time, I didn't really have anything to lose. I spent money on money I didn't have to fly to Seattle. I was in the room, and I'll be damned if I walk out with nothing in my pocket. I mean, it just wasn't going to happen. And so in the moment, it's like, what is it? So if they're telling me that all these people come in with all these large archives, then you have to think on your feet and reframe that and say, yeah, but how much of it are you really selling? Well, as you know, in these archives, only a certain percentage will sell. I said, wait, not so fast. So they gave me the breadcrumbs to follow.
They gave you the clue. Yeah.
They gave me the clue. So you can either now be freaked out and say, shit, it's over. They're, this is what they go, or you take that and you reframe it quickly and in that moment. And then they go like, why are we getting these big archives where so much stuff doesn't sell? Why wouldn't we get a smaller archive with only high quality images? Because they could look at them and they said, the stuff is like, every image is good. I'm like,
yeah, it's so funny. I remember thinking to myself, these people literally fund magazines just so they can look at pictures of themselves. Mm-hmm. If I'm going to get to them, it's going to be through their vanity.
Yeah.
And that's what I played into.
Yeah. So
how do you teach people to reframe or to be so audacious?
I have a process.
You do?
That's where the German comes in. Yes. So I do a lot of optimal alignment. So I look at the different pieces and how they align or not align. I look for congruency. So when I look at the person and I look at what they're saying and I see where the passion is in my head, immediately it spits out the system. I create unique system formulas. I've built a lot of people's systems where they say, well, I do so many different things and I don't know how I'm going to put it all under one umbrella. And, how do I tell people what I'm really good at, but I do this, I do that. So building that umbrella and then making everything fit. I do it in a day. It's really not difficult for me, but that, I think part of it really comes from, and Jeff, I bet you do the same thing, because you had to overcome such unsurmountable circumstances that when you're presented with something that other people perceive as a problem, your brain immediately goes to solution because you trained yourself not to dwell in the problem. You don't go in the can we, you go in the how can we.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you're right. You know, I'm sure you're familiar with Grant Cardone and his whole 10x thinking concept. I was thinking about this earlier, that I feel like, you know, you can explain 10x to someone and say, no, you're capable of 10 times more, or you need to think 10 times bigger, or you need to take 10 times the amount of action that you're thinking, or like you can present it as like here's where you are, and you need to do 10x to get where you want to go. And most people won't take that, right? But if you shove somebody down 10 times further than they think they could ever recover from, in other words, if you had said to me, hey, Jeff, if I put you $50,000 in debt as a piano player who makes $50,000 a year, do you think you could recover? I probably would have said yes. But if you said, okay, I'm going to add a zero. If I put you $500,000 in debt as a $50,000 piano player, do you think you could recover? I don't think that intellectually I would have said yes. So the only way to get me to prove that I could do it would be to actually put me in the debt. And that's where I think catastrophe teaches us lessons that we could never intellectually comprehend if we didn't actually experience their reality, their realism. And so you're right. Once you've done it, it's like, I have a friend that recovered from stage 4 cancer. He's just not afraid of things, because he knows he survived stage 4 cancer.
That's it.
There's no way you could have explained that to him. He just had to go through it. You went through it. I went through it. And so my invitation to everybody listening is like, go through stop trying to play it so safe, because it's either going to be the success that unlocks your greatness or the failure that builds the muscle that helps you unlock your greatness.
I think you're absolutely right, because you do lose the fear. So once all of this has happened to you, so what, right? And now today, you remember what it felt like. You remember the desperation. You remember the fear, the sleepless nights, the heart palpitation, the nervous breakdown, the anxiety, the depression, the feeling of completely being alone. But we got out of it. And I think that's the powerful piece, is that you cannot be afraid of the depth of that experience, because at the bottom of that experience is the activation to the greatness.
Yeah. Do you think you got lucky?
No. Lucky, what means luck? Luck is an interesting terminology. I think maybe, let me rephrase it. I think in a way I got really lucky. I think I didn't plan any of this. You know, I wasn't like I sat down with a pen and a paper and looked at KPIs and ROIs and whatever there was. I was making shit up as I went along, based upon my intuition and my big mouth and my arrogance and my, very strong German stubbornness.
I liked your word audacity. That's a better word than my arrogance. Let's go. I like audacity.
Yeah. Resilience is the audacity to never give up. That's one of my quotes. And having that audacity to say, I will not drown in a puddle. And that was really my driving thought on to say, is this big enough for me to fail? No, not big enough for me to fail yet. So I haven't failed yet, because the marker of what it would have meant. Do you see where we are?
That was so good. I don't know if that was good for anybody else, but is this big enough for me to fail? No. Okay. Then I haven't actually failed yet.
There you go.
I don't even know how to follow that up. I mean, to be honest, I'm 8 minutes late for a meeting. We should probably just wrap on that. Like, damn. Beate, no, in all seriousness, I shot a message. I'm not like delinquent. I told her I'll be late, but thank you. This has been a really fantastic conversation. I'm really grateful.
We knew it was going to be a good conversation. We just didn't know how good it was going to be.
Well, that's the thing. You try to plan this stuff and it never goes to plan anyways, right? It was make God laugh, tell him your plans, right? So I got to have that audacity.
Exactly.
Hey, tell the world how they can go get to know you better.
Yes, so you can check me out on all social media, reach out on Instagram, shoot me a DM. You can also find me on my website, beatechelette.com, and it'll be in the show notes on how to spell that properly. And I have a brand new piece that I'm literally just publishing. It's called 3 Essential Framework Elements for Building a Sustainable Business Model. And you can pick that up at the successblueprint.biz. I'm literally putting this up today. So your tribe will be the first one to download that, and I'll give you the 3 essential framework elements for building a sustainable business model.
If you loved that episode, then you're definitely gonna love this one. Check it out.
Everyone had given up on me. No one was coming to save me. If I wanted to change my life, if I wanted to go on to live my full potential, that I had to make that commitment. And that's exactly what I did.